Pull the drain plug on a Lycoming O-320 after 100 hours and watch the oil stream into the pan. Dark amber, combustion stained, doing exactly what oil is supposed to do. But if the engine has been sitting, you may notice something else in that stream. A silver shimmer. Metal so fine the filter never stopped it, so small it only shows when the light hits the drain pan at the right angle. That shimmer is your camshaft eating itself. The Lycoming O-320 has powered more general aviation aircraft than any other engine family in American history. 160 horsepower, 4 cylinders, carbureted, direct drive, under the cowling of Cessna, 172 aircraft, Piper Cherokees, and Super Cubs at 40,000 airports. It is the engine your flight instructor almost certainly learned on. It is probably the engine your airplane runs right now. For over 70 years, Lycoming has sold the O-320 as a bulletproof workhorse, reliable, affordable, simple. But there is a structural decision buried inside that engine, a choice made in 1953 and never corrected, that turns the O-320 into a slow financial disaster for every owner who does not fly it at least once a week. The camshaft sits at the top of the crankcase, above the crankshaft. The moment you shut down, gravity pulls every drop of oil off those cam lobes and lifter faces. Moisture enters through the crankcase breather. Rust begins forming in the hardened steel while the aircraft sits on your ramp. The clock starts the moment you walk away. Today, we are opening the case. Which engine are you actually sitting behind, and what is it going to cost you when you find out? The O-320 received its FAA Type Certificate on July 28, 1953. It displaces 319.8 cubic inches, 5.24 liters, in a horizontally opposed 4-cylinder air-cooled configuration. It spins at 2,700 revolutions per minute and produces between 150 and 160 horsepower, depending on the variant. The O-320 family spans 92 distinct certified variants. It powers the Cessna 172 from the 1968 model year through the 172P built until 1986. It powers the Piper Cherokee 140, the Piper Warrior, the Piper PA-18-150 Super Cub, and the early Robinson R-22 helicopter. It powers Van's RV-4, RV-6, RV-7, and RV-8 series kit aircraft. Lycoming holds approximately 96,000 certified piston engines in the active United States fleet, more than any other general aviation engine manufacturer. The O-320 and its companion, the O-360, account for the core of that population. Most flight schools in the United States run Lycoming O-320 or O-360 airframes. Most of the private pilots flying in America today got their first 100 hours behind one of these engines. That ubiquity is part of what makes the cam problem difficult to talk about. The O-320 has too strong a reputation to criticize and too wide a footprint to ignore. Every airport in America has one running somewhere on the field. Inside the engine, the camshaft is gear-driven at half the speed of the crankshaft, one rotation for every 2 crank revolutions. Its lobes push against hydraulic tappets, also called lifters, which actuate push rods that open and close the intake and exhaust valves. The cam lobes are case-hardened steel, carburized under heat to create a surface layer that resists wear. Against those cam lobes ride the lifter faces, chilled cast iron slightly softer than the lobe, designed to absorb damage first. The contact pressure at that interface is among the highest of any surface in the engine. There is no pressurized oil port aimed directly at the cam and lifter contact zone. They run entirely on splash lubrication, oil thrown off the spinning crankshaft and connecting rods below. That system works when the engine is turning. The instant it stops, the oil drains. On a Lycoming engine, the camshaft sits at the top of the crankcase above the crankshaft. On a Continental engine, the camshaft sits below the crankshaft. When a Lycoming shuts down, the cam lobes and lifter faces are the first metal surfaces in the engine to run completely dry. The Continental cam loses its oil film more slowly, with gravity working against it rather than with it. That positional difference, perhaps 8 inches of vertical space between competing designs, is the root of every expensive conversation that follows. The second structural choice matters just as much. Lycoming uses a mushroom-shaped lifter body. The face of that lifter is wider than the bore it sits in, which makes it physically impossible to remove without splitting the crankcase completely in two. Continental uses a barrel-shaped lifter that slides straight out through an access port in the crankcase wall, no disassembly required. I have opened enough Lycoming cases to know the pattern on the other side of that design choice. A corroded cam lobe under a mushroom lifter is not a maintenance call. It is an overhaul. That is the design decision that changes everything. In 1968, Cessna installed the Lycoming O-320 E2D in the new 172i, replacing the Continental O-300 that had powered the aircraft for 12 years. The switch was considered routine, 5 more horsepower, cleaner architecture, and Cessna was satisfied. That partnership held for 9 years. Then came the 172N. In 1977, Cessna introduced the Skyhawk powered by the O-320H2AD, an engine variant that used barrel-shaped hydraulic lifters instead of the standard Lycoming mushroom design. The engineering intention was legitimate. Barrel-shaped lifters could be pulled out for inspection and replacement without splitting the case. Lycoming intended the H-series to be easier to service. The outcome inverted that intention completely. The barrel geometry changed the load distribution between the lifter face and the cam lobe. Contact pressure concentrated in a way the metallurgy could not sustain. Spalling, metal fatigue at the contact surface with material breaking away in flakes, appeared within the first few hundred hours of service. A Cessna dealer operating in Baltimore in 1977 reported that tappets on brand new 172N aircraft were showing measurable spalling at every 100-hour inspection. Failure was appearing at approximately 250 hours in new engines. Cessna issued an emergency wave of service bulletins the company called Operation Blue Streak. The FAA issued Airworthiness Directive 80-04-03, mandating inspections and modifications across the entire H2AD fleet. Lycoming redesigned the engine 3 times in response. First, a wider lobe camshaft designed to distribute the contact load. Then, a larger diameter tappet body designed to handle the revised geometry. When the revised tappet body would not fit the original crankcase bore, Lycoming built a new crankcase to house it. Paul McBride, who spent nearly 40 years at Lycoming Engines, summarized the sequence without embellishment. 3 configurations, 3 attempts, and a new crankcase ultimately required. In 1981, Cessna introduced the 172P with the O-320 D2J. The H2AD disappeared from Cessna production. It did not disappear from the used aircraft market. Thousands of 172N aircraft with H2AD engines remain on the FAA registry today. Many have received the factory modifications and are, by any measure, sound. A number have not. The H2AD-equipped 172Ns without the T modification are reliably among the cheapest Skyhawks listed for sale. That price gap is the market communicating what the brochure omits. And the H2AD is only the loudest chapter in this story. The quieter one has been running since 1953. In October 2019, Aviation Consumer published an investigation into what engine overhaul shops were actually seeing inside standard Lycoming engines when they cracked them open at TBO. The lead source was Bill Middlebrook at Penn Aero in New York. His assessment was 3 words, definitely worse in my opinion. Penn sent physical cam samples and spalled lifters to the publication as documentation. Middlebrook also reported that a brand new camshaft, factory fresh, 0 hours, never installed in an aircraft, came apart during a test cell run. 1 lobe wiped completely. The rejection rate numbers told the same story. Overhaul shops used to reject approximately 1 in 20 first-run camshafts for reuse at the time between overhauls. By the time of the 2019 investigation, the rate had shifted to 1 in 7. That is not a statistical fluctuation. One shop commissioned an independent metallurgical analysis of cam and tappet material. The report described the dissimilar materials at the contact interface as a corrosion vulnerability, and the analysts were not diplomatic in their assessment. The failure pattern had also stopped fitting the standard explanation. The standard explanation is behavioral. A private owner who flies 40 hours a year lets the aircraft sit for 2 months and allows moisture to work on the unprotected cam until rust pits form. That explanation covers some failures. It does not cover all of them. Middlebrook's shop was seeing cam failures in engines that flew regularly, in flight school fleets, in hangared aircraft, in dry climates where humidity was never a concern. The Lycoming cam sits in the direct path of bloby gases rising from the cylinders. Those gases are humid and carry combustion acids. At shutdown, the oil drains and the blow-by residue settles on the exposed cam steel. When you restart the engine 2 weeks later, those rust patches break free under the pressure of the rotating cam lobe. The rough lifter face begins wearing the cam lobe faster than the lobe wears the lifter. The cascade accelerates. In the right environment, corrosion pitting begins forming in the microscopic surface structure of a cam lobe within hours of shutdown. The first indicator in the drain pan is a silver sheen, particles too fine for the oil filter, visible only when the light catches the draining oil at the right angle. By the time the filter starts catching actual chips, the cam lobe geometry has already changed. Valve timing has drifted. Power has bled off by increments the pilot cannot feel from the left seat. The engine keeps making power. The aircraft departs, and nobody told the owner. Owners who fly every week do not pay these bills. The ones who don't fly are keeping me in business. Now run the same failure mechanism on 2 different engines. A Continental barrel-type lifter, showing corrosion spalling can be pulled from the crankcase without removing a single cylinder. A parts manufacturer-approved replacement lifter body costs approximately $75. The repair closes in a single shop day. A Lycoming mushroom-type lifter showing identical corrosion cannot exit the engine without the crankcase being split completely in 2. Splitting the case means a complete teardown. A complete teardown means a full overhaul. Penn Yan Aero's 2023 exchange quote on an overhauled O-320 was $42,000 plus a $12,000 core deposit. Identical corrosion mechanism. 2 entirely different design decisions. One conversation costs a day of shop time and $75, the other costs $54,000. The Lycoming O-320's recommended time between overhauls, known as TBO, is 2,000 flight hours. Lycoming also mandates a 12-year calendar limit. The engine must be overhauled 12 years after its last major work, regardless of hours flown, because rubber seals and gaskets age whether the aircraft flies or not. The FAA reports piston aircraft engines fail at a rate of 1 per 3,200 flight hours. Aviation Consumer examined a body of NTSB accident records involving engine failures and found that 41% of Lycoming engine failures had no determined cause, the highest unknown cause rate of any major engine category in the dataset. Bruce Landsberg, then NTSB vice chairman, acknowledged that engine failure investigation was the agency's largest uncleared area, and regional investigators were enrolled in specialized engine failure training programs to address the deficit. The CAM is the most probable unnamed cause in a substantial share of those unknowns. Cam spalling does not announce itself with catastrophic failure. The engine keeps making power as the lobe geometry flattens. The degradation stays below the threshold of what a pilot can detect. A damaged cam does not pull the throttle. It lets the aircraft depart. Now compare 2 ownership trajectories across the identical engine. A flight school aircraft accumulates 40+ hours per month. The engine runs every day, the oil cycles before moisture can settle, and the cam surfaces stay coated. That aircraft reaches 2,000 hours. The overhaul costs $25,000 to $45,000, planned for and reserved against. A private owner accumulates 60 hours per year. The aircraft sits 3 weeks in the fall, 6 weeks over the winter, 2 months while life intervenes. That aircraft does not reach 2,000 hours. The KAM fails at 900 hours, or 1,100 hours, or 700 hours. The overhaul costs the same $25,000 to $45,000, arriving unscheduled, unbudgeted on a Sunday morning when the mechanic cuts the oil filter open and holds it under the shop light. The engine's time between overhauls was written for an aircraft that flies. The calendar limit exists for an aircraft that ages. Neither of them protects the private owner from a cam that goes dry on a Wednesday afternoon and begins consuming itself before the owner returns on Saturday. In April 2025, Flying Magazine published a technical article in which J.D. Cootie, president of Pinnacle Aircraft Engines in Alabama, confirmed that Lycoming acknowledges camshafts and tappet bodies are prone to fail. In December 2024, the FAA issued Airworthiness Directive 2024-21-02, mandating inspection at every oil change for bronze metal particulates across most Lycoming 4- and 6-cylinder engines. The directive traced to connecting rod bushing failures, causing uncontained engine damage, and in-flight shutdowns, in parts shipped from a Lycoming supplier between January 2009 and September 2021. 12 years of potentially non-conforming parts inside flying aircraft before inspection became mandatory. That is the regulatory pace of general aviation. Every decade, a new generation of buyers discovers the O-320's reputation before they understand its vulnerability. Reliable, affordable, familiar. Those words have appeared in every buyer's guide for 60 years, and they are accurate for the aircraft that flies every week. They are expensive words for the aircraft that does not. Thousands of O-320s have run well past time between overhauls in flight schools where the engine never sat for 2 weeks without running. The engine is not broken. The ownership pattern breaks it. The fix that Lycoming cannot sell and the FAA cannot mandate is the same one it has always been. Fly the airplane. Not the additive in the crankcase, not the preservation spray through the spark plug holes. The only protection that the cam has is the oil film the spinning crankshaft throws at it while the engine is running. Shut it down, and that film is gone in minutes. Every owner of a Lycoming-powered aircraft watching this has one question worth answering honestly. Not whether the logbook looks clean or the annual came back without a discrepancy. When did you last actually fly it? Not last month? Last week. The cam does not wait for the annual. It starts the moment you close the hangar door. Are you flying yours enough to keep it alive, or is your mechanic going to tell you what the oil filter already knows?